You can tell a lot about a man by what he keeps running when everyone else says it's time to quit. The parking lot was nearly empty, washed in the dull amber glow of a flickering streetlight that buzzed like it was too tired to stay awake. A faded Mustang sat in the far corner, its paint chipped, its hood slightly misaligned, like it had stories it never bothered to tell. Inside, a small boy slept curled against the passenger door, his cheek pressed into a backpack that had seen better days, his tiny sneakers still on. Ethan Brooks stood beside the car, sleeves rolled, hands stained with grease that no soap ever fully removed. He didn't rush. He never did. The world rushed enough for both of them. The sound came first, the soft hum of a luxury engine gliding across smooth asphalt, clean, effortless, expensive. It stopped a few feet away, precise, controlled. A door opened. He didn't look up right away. He finished wiping his hands on a worn rag, slow, deliberate. Then he glanced over. Charlotte Voss stepped out in heels that clicked like they had somewhere important to be, even when she didn't. Her coat was tailored, her posture sharper than the edges of the glass building behind her. Everything about her said control. Everything about her said distance. Her eyes landed on the Mustang, then on Ethan, then back on the car again. She didn't hide the pause. "That thing shouldn't even be on the road," she said, her voice calm, not loud, but clean enough to cut through the quiet. Ethan didn't answer. He turned the rag once in his hands, folded it, tucked it into his back pocket. The kind of movement you only notice when nothing else is happening. Charlotte waited, maybe expecting something, defense, irritation, anything that would confirm what she already believed. But nothing came. Just silence. A soft breath. The distant hum of the city beyond the lot. Her gaze shifted, almost by accident, toward the inside of the car. The boy stirred slightly, adjusting his head, one small hand still gripping the strap of his bag like it mattered. Something in her expression flickered. Not warmth. Not yet. Just hesitation. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed. He reached for the door handle but didn't open it, not fully. Just enough to check on the kid without waking him. Careful. Always careful. Charlotte crossed her arms, but it wasn't defensive. Not exactly. It was something closer to holding herself in place. "Does it even start?" she asked after a second, softer this time, like the question had lost some of its edge on the way out. Ethan finally looked at her. Not challenging. Not impressed. Just steady. "Sometimes," he said. Then he reached inside, turned the key. The engine coughed. Once. Twice. Then nothing. The silence came back heavier this time. He didn't curse. Didn't sigh. He just sat there for a second, hands still on the wheel, eyes forward like he was listening to something no one else could hear. From the passenger seat, a small voice, still half asleep, barely above a whisper. "Dad, we gonna make it tomorrow?" Ethan didn't turn right away. He let the question settle. Then he answered, quiet and certain. "Yeah. We always do." Charlotte didn't speak. Not this time. She just stood there, watching a man who didn't defend himself, didn't explain himself, didn't need to prove anything, and somehow, that unsettled her more than if he had. The key stayed in his hand a second longer than it needed to, like he was giving the engine time to change its mind, but it did not. The silence held, steady, unbothered, and Ethan slowly let his hand fall away from the ignition, not defeated, not surprised, just accepting, like a man who had learned a long time ago that some things take more than one try. Beside him the boy shifted again, eyes still closed, breathing soft, trusting without needing proof, and Ethan reached over, gently pulling the backpack from under his head, replacing it with his folded jacket, careful not to wake him, the kind of care that never made noise. Charlotte watched that, not the car, not the failed start, but that small adjustment, the way he moved like the moment mattered even if no one was looking. She uncrossed her arms without realizing it, her hands resting at her sides now, lighter somehow. The parking lot felt different, quieter in a way that was not empty, just still. You are not going to call roadside assistance? She asked after a moment, her voice losing its sharp edge. Ethan shook his head once. Subtle, costs more than it should, he said, simple, no complaint in it, just fact. Charlotte glanced back at her own car, flawless paint reflecting the overhead light, everything working exactly as it should, always. She hesitated, then reached into her coat pocket, pulling out her phone. I could have someone here in 15 minutes, she said, not offering help so much as stating a possibility. Ethan looked at her again, same steady gaze, not dismissive, not impressed, just present. I appreciate it, he said, and for a second it sounded like he might say yes, but he did not. He just nodded once and turned back toward the Mustang, lifting the hood with a soft creak that sounded older than both of them. The engine sat there, worn but intact, wires organized in a way that spoke of care, not neglect. Ethan leaned in, checking connections with his fingers, not rushing, not guessing, just knowing where to look. Charlotte stepped closer without meaning to, the heels that once sounded sharp now softer against the pavement. She stopped a few feet away, watching, really watching this time. You fix it yourself? She asked, quieter now. Ethan nodded slightly. Most things, he said. He adjusted a small component near the battery, tightened it, then paused, listening again, not with his ears alone, but with something deeper, something practiced. Charlotte tilted her head, confused by the stillness. What are you listening for? She asked. Ethan did not look up. What it is not telling me, he replied, and the answer sat there between them, unfamiliar, not the kind of thing she was used to hearing in boardrooms or meetings or reports. She looked at the engine again, then at him, trying to understand a process that did not come with numbers or projections, just patience. Behind them the city hummed faintly, distant traffic, a siren far away, life moving as it always did, but here, in this small corner of asphalt and dim light, time felt slower, more deliberate. Ethan reached for the ignition again, but this time he did not turn it right away. He glanced once toward the passenger seat, toward the boy, then back at the engine, like he was making a quiet promise no one else heard. Charlotte noticed that too, and something in her posture shifted again, less rigid, less certain. She did not speak this time, she just stayed, waiting without realizing she was waiting, and for the first time that night, she was not thinking about where she needed to be next, she was just there. The key turned this time without hesitation, a quiet click that sounded almost ordinary, but Ethan did not rush it. He let the moment breathe, let the engine decide on its own terms, and for a second nothing happened. Then a low vibration moved through the frame, subtle at first, like a whisper under metal. Charlotte leaned in slightly, not realizing she had stepped closer. The sound grew, uneven, rough around the edges, but alive. The Mustang did not roar, it did not perform, it simply started. Steady in a way that felt earned. Ethan kept his hand on the wheel, listening again, not celebrating, not reacting, just making sure it would hold. The boy in the passenger seat shifted, eyes fluttering open just enough to see the dashboard lights glow. It is working, he murmured, voice thick with sleep. Ethan glanced over, a small nod. Yeah, it is, he said, quiet, and that was enough. The boy's head settled back into the jacket. Trust restored without question. Charlotte exhaled softly, a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Her eyes stayed on the car, but her attention was somewhere else now, on the way it happened, on the absence of show, the absence of anything she could measure or categorize. You knew it would start, she said after a moment, not quite a question. Ethan shook his head slightly. No, he replied, simple, I just knew where to look, and that answer stayed with her longer than it should have. She glanced at her own car again, perfect, predictable, engineered to remove uncertainty, then back at his, imperfect, stubborn, but understood. She hesitated, then took another step forward, closer than before, close enough to see the details, the worn edges, the careful repairs, the small choices that kept it running. How long have you had it? She asked. Ethan leaned back slightly, closing the hood with a firm but gentle motion. Long enough, he said, not avoiding, just not explaining more than needed. Charlotte nodded, but her eyes drifted to the passenger seat again, to the boy, to the quiet rhythm of his breathing. "And you trust it?" she asked, softer now. Ethan followed her gaze, then looked back at the car. "I trust what I take care of," he said. And there was no pride in it, just truth, the kind that does not need to be proven. Charlotte let that sit, her fingers brushing lightly against her coat sleeve, a small, unconscious movement, like she was grounding herself in something unfamiliar. The night air felt cooler now, or maybe she was just more aware of it. The space between them no longer felt like distance, just quiet, and for the first time that evening, she did not feel the need to fill it. Ethan reached for the door, opening it slowly. Careful again, he adjusted the jacket around the boy, tucking it closer, making sure he stayed warm. The engine idled softly in the background, steady now, consistent. Charlotte watched the way he moved, the patience, the intention, the absence of urgency, and something in her shifted again. Not a realization, not yet, just a question forming where certainty used to be. "You always this calm?" she asked, almost under her breath. Ethan paused for a second, then looked at her. Not analyzing, not judging, just meeting her where she stood. "No," he said, "I just do not rush what matters," and the words landed quietly, but they stayed, heavier than they sounded. Charlotte did not respond, she just stood there, listening to the engine, to the silence around it, to something inside herself that felt different, like a door had opened just a little, and she was not sure when it happened. The engine settled into a steady rhythm, low and consistent, like it had found its place again, and Ethan rested his hand lightly on the steering wheel for a second before stepping back, not lingering, not admiring, just moving on like the moment had already passed for him. Charlotte stayed where she was, watching the car idle, watching him, trying to understand how something so simple could feel so different from everything she was used to. "You could fix bigger things than this," she said after a moment, her voice measured, almost cautious. Ethan closed the driver's side door quietly, making sure it did not click too loud. "Maybe," he said, not dismissing it, not claiming it, just leaving it where it was. Charlotte took a step closer, the distance between them now small enough that she could see the fine lines of wear on his hands, the kind that came from years of doing, not talking. "I run a company that builds engines," she said, not as an introduction, but as context, as if that might explain something. Ethan nodded once. He already knew who she was, everyone in that building did, but he did not say it, he did not change the way he stood. Charlotte continued, "We have teams of engineers, specialists, people who analyze every variable down to the smallest fraction." She paused, searching for the right words, and still, things fail. Ethan listened, not interrupting, not filling the silence, just letting her reach whatever she was trying to say. She glanced at the Mustang again, then back at him. "You listen to it," she said, quieter now, more to herself than to him. Ethan shrugged slightly. "Machines talk," he replied, "just not the way people expect." Charlotte let out a soft breath, something between a laugh and something else she could not quite place. "Most people I work with expect data," she said. Ethan nodded. "Data is good," he said, "but it does not always tell you why something matters." The words hung there, simple, but they did not feel small. Charlotte looked at him for a long second, really looked, like she was trying to map something she had never studied before. Then she glanced back at her own car again, then at his, and for the first time, the difference between them did not feel like status, it felt like perspective. "I have a problem," she said finally, the words slower now, less controlled than before. Ethan did not react right away, he just waited. She continued, "A new engine design, high performance, worth more than most people would see in a lifetime, and it does not run the way it should." She paused, watching him, expecting something this time, maybe curiosity, maybe interest, but Ethan only tilted his head slightly, listening. "We have run every test," she added, "every model, every simulation, every metric says it should work." Ethan's expression did not change, but something in his focus sharpened, just a little. "And it does not," he said, not as a question. Charlotte shook her head once. "No," she replied, quiet, the word carrying more weight than she intended. "The engine behind them continued to idle, steady, reliable in its own imperfect way." Ethan glanced at it briefly, then back at her. "Maybe it is saying something," he said. Charlotte frowned slightly, not dismissive, just unsure. "Saying what?" she asked. Ethan held her gaze for a second, calm, grounded, "That it is not built for what you are asking it to be." he answered, and the simplicity of it caught her off guard. She blinked, processing. The kind of answer no report had ever given her, the kind of answer that did not fit into charts or presentations. The night felt quieter again, like the world had stepped back just enough to let that thought settle. Charlotte looked at him differently now, not above him, not past him, but directly at him, and for the first time since she stepped out of that car, she was not evaluating him, she was considering him. "Would you look at it?" she asked. The question softer than anything she had said all night. Ethan did not answer right away. He glanced once more at the boy in the passenger seat, then back at her, and the pause between them said more than either of them expected. The question stayed between them longer than it should have, not heavy, not urgent, just waiting, and Ethan looked at her the way he looked at everything else that night, steady, unhurried, like he was deciding whether the moment deserved his time. He glanced once more at the boy, still asleep, still trusting the world to hold together while he rested, then back at Charlotte. "When?" he asked. "Simple." Charlotte blinked, not expecting agreement so quickly. "Tomorrow," she said, then corrected herself. "No, as soon as you can." Her voice tightened slightly at the edges, not impatience, just the weight of something unresolved. Ethan nodded once. "Morning is better," he said. "He has school after." He motioned lightly toward the car. Charlotte followed the gesture, her gaze softening again for a second before she caught herself. 7:30, she asked, already adjusting her schedule in her head, already moving things that usually did not move for anyone. Ethan considered it, then shook his head slightly. 8, he said. He eats slow. There was no apology in it, just a fact. Charlotte paused, then gave a small nod. 8, she repeated, and something about the exchange felt unfamiliar to her, the way the time bent around something simple instead of the other way around. She slipped her phone back into her coat pocket without typing a single note, without confirming anything, just trusting it would happen, a habit she did not recognize in herself. The Mustang continued to idle, steady, patient. Ethan reached in and turned it off, the engine settling into silence again without protest. He opened the passenger door gently, adjusting the jacket once more, making sure the boy stayed warm. Charlotte watched him, not the action itself, but the consistency of it, the way every small thing seemed to matter in the same quiet way. "What is his name?" she asked, softer now. Ethan glanced up briefly. "Miles," he said. Charlotte repeated it in her head, not out loud, like she was placing it somewhere she would not forget. "He seems peaceful," she added after a moment, unsure of the word but choosing it anyway. Ethan nodded slightly. "Kids are, when you do not rush them," he said. Charlotte let out a faint breath, almost a smile, but not quite. She shifted her weight, looking back at the building behind them, glass reflecting a version of the world she understood, then back at him, standing beside a car that should not have worked but did. "You do not seem surprised by any of this," she said, more curious than before. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "By what?" he asked. Charlotte gestured lightly between them, the parking lot, the conversation, the decision that had just been made without contracts or titles or conditions. "This," she said. Ethan looked around for a second, then back at her. "It is just a conversation," he replied, and the simplicity of it made her pause again, because to her, nothing was ever just anything. Everything had layers, implications, outcomes, but here, it did not, and that unsettled her in a way she could not quite explain. A quiet settled over them again, not awkward, not empty, just present. Charlotte stepped back toward her car, her heel sounding a little sharper again, but not as sharp as before. She opened the door, then stopped, one hand resting on the frame. She looked at him once more, longer this time, like she was trying to hold on to something she had not fully understood yet. 8, she said again, softer. Ethan gave a small nod. 8, he echoed, and that was it. No handshake, no formal close, just an agreement that did not need more than it already had. Charlotte slid into her seat, the door closing with a quiet precision. Her engine started without hesitation, smooth, controlled, exactly as expected, but for the first time, it did not feel like enough. She sat there for a second longer than usual, hands resting on the wheel, eyes forward, then she pulled away, the car gliding out of the lot, leaving behind the dim light, the quiet, and a man who had not tried to impress her, had not tried to prove anything, and somehow, that was the only thing she could not stop thinking about. The morning came without announcement, just a thin line of pale light stretching across the edge of the city, quiet and unassuming, and the parking lot looked different now, less shadow, more detail, the cracks in the asphalt visible, the faded lines clearer. Ethan was already there, leaning lightly against the Mustang with a paper cup of coffee in his hand, steam rising slowly into the cool air. Miles sat inside the car, awake this time, flipping through a small book, his legs swinging slightly, shoes tapping softly against the seat. The engine was off, but the car felt ready, like it knew it had done its part for now. Ethan took a small sip, not in a hurry, never in a hurry. He glanced at his watch, then at the entrance of the building, then back at his son, making sure everything was as it should be. A black sedan pulled into the lot a few minutes later, smooth, precise, stopping exactly where it intended to. Charlotte stepped out, already composed, already in motion, but something about her pace was different, not slower, just less sharp. She saw them immediately, her gaze landing on Ethan first, then shifting to Miles, who looked up briefly, curious but unbothered. "Morning," she said, her voice even, but without the edge it had the night before. Ethan nodded once. "Morning," he replied. Miles closed his book halfway, watching her with the kind of open curiosity adults forget how to carry. Charlotte gave him a small nod, almost instinctive, then turned back to Ethan. "You ready?" she asked, direct but not demanding. Ethan set his cup down on the hood, folding the empty sleeve of it between his fingers. "We can go," he said, then glanced toward Miles. "Grab your bag," he added gently. Miles nodded, sliding out of the car, pulling the backpack over his shoulders, adjusting it with small practiced movements. Charlotte watched the exchange, the ease of it, the lack of instruction needed beyond a few words. "He comes with you?" she asked, not questioning, just confirming. Ethan nodded. "He always does before school," he said. Charlotte hesitated for a second, then nodded back. "That is fine," she said, and for once, the word did not feel like permission, just acknowledgement. They moved toward her car together, Ethan opening the rear door for Miles, making sure he was settled. Seatbelt clicked, bag placed beside him, everything in order. Charlotte stood by the driver's side, watching again, noticing again. Then she got in, hands resting on the wheel for a brief moment before starting the engine. It responded instantly, flawless, predictable, but she did not move right away. She glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting Miles's eyes for a second. He gave a small smile, not polite, just real. She looked forward again, then drove. The city waking up around them, traffic building, lights changing, people moving with purpose. Inside the car, the silence was different, not empty, not filled with expectation, just shared. Charlotte spoke first, her eyes on the road. "The facility is about 10 miles from here," she said. "Private lab, restricted access." Ethan nodded slightly, taking in the information without reacting to the scale of it. Miles looked out the window, watching buildings pass, counting something quietly under his breath. Charlotte noticed that too. "What is he doing?" she asked, softer now. Ethan glanced back briefly. "Counting buses," he said. Charlotte blinked, then looked ahead again, a faint smile touching her lips before disappearing. "He is at 12, Ethan added, and Miles nodded from the back, confirming it without speaking. The car moved forward, smooth, controlled, but something about the moment felt less like a transaction and more like a beginning, even if neither of them said it out loud. The building did not announce itself with noise. It rose out of the edge of the city like it had always been there, glass and steel catching the early light in a way that felt deliberate, controlled, the kind of place where nothing was left to chance. Charlotte slowed the car as they approached the security gate, a camera adjusting its angle slightly as if recognizing her before she even stopped. The barrier lifted without question, smooth, silent, and they drove through. Ethan watched it without comment, taking in the details the way he always did, not impressed, just aware. Miles leaned forward slightly in the back seat, eyes wide now. Counting had stopped, replaced by curiosity. "This where you work?" he asked, his voice quiet but clear. Charlotte glanced at him in the mirror. "Yes," she said, then after a small pause, "Sometimes." Miles nodded like that made sense, settling back again. The car followed a curved path toward a low structure set behind the main tower, less polished, more functional. Charlotte parked near a secured entrance, the engine turning off with the same precision it started. She stepped out first, the morning air cooler here, quieter, like the place held its breath. Ethan opened the rear door for Miles, helping him out, adjusting the strap of his backpack, making sure it sat right on his shoulders. Small things, always the small things. Charlotte watched for a second, then turned toward the door, a panel lighting up as she approached, her hand resting briefly against it. A soft tone sounded, and the door unlocked. They stepped inside. The air changed immediately, cooler, filtered, the faint hum of systems running somewhere behind the walls. The hallway stretched ahead, clean, minimal, every surface intentional. People moved through it with purpose, tablets in hand, voices low, conversations precise. But something shifted as Charlotte walked in. Heads turned, not dramatically, just enough to acknowledge her presence, authority without announcement. Ethan noticed that too, but it did not change the way he walked. Same pace, same posture. Miles stayed close, looking around, taking everything in without touching anything. Charlotte led them through a series of doors, each opening with a quiet confirmation, deeper into the building, until they reached a larger space. A lab that felt less like an office and more like a controlled environment. In the center, under focused lighting, sat the engine, mounted on a stand, surrounded by cables, monitors, and tools that looked expensive even without labels. It was not loud, not running, but it held attention, like it knew it was the reason everything else existed. Charlotte stopped a few feet away, her expression shifting slightly, not pride, not frustration, something in between. "This is it," she said, her voice lower now, almost careful. Ethan stepped forward slowly, not rushing toward it, not reaching out, just observing, his eyes moving across the structure, the connections, the design, taking it in piece by piece. Miles stayed near the entrance, watching his father, not the machine. Charlotte noticed that too, and something about it stayed with her, the way the boy watched the man, not the thing he was about to fix. Ethan circled the engine once, silent, hands at his sides, not touching, not yet, just listening again in his own way. Charlotte waited, not interrupting, not explaining. For the first time in that room, she did not feel the need to fill the silence with data or expectation. She just stood there, watching him see something no one else had been able to find, and for a moment, the entire room felt like it was waiting with her. The room did not move, but something inside it shifted, subtle, almost invisible, as Ethan stopped beside the engine and finally reached out, not with urgency, not with curiosity, but with familiarity, his fingers resting lightly against the metal casing as if he was greeting it, not testing it. The surrounding engineers watched from a distance, some pretending to stay busy, others openly observing, their expressions controlled but questioning. Charlotte stood still, arms relaxed at her sides, her attention fixed entirely on him, not on the machine she had spent months trying to understand. Ethan leaned in slightly, his eyes tracing the connections, the flow between components, the way everything was arranged with precision but not necessarily harmony. He did not touch anything else yet, just that first point of contact. Then he stepped back half a step, listening again, not for sound, but for intention. Charlotte noticed the pause, the same kind of pause he had taken with the Mustang, the same quiet moment where nothing happened but everything seemed to align. "It is not broken," he said finally, his voice calm, certain, the words landing in the room like a contradiction no one had prepared for. One of the engineers shifted slightly, glancing at Charlotte before speaking. "We have run full diagnostics," he said, careful, professional. "There are inconsistencies in output efficiency, thermal variance beyond acceptable range." Ethan nodded once, acknowledging the words without reacting to them. "Yeah," he said softly, then looked back at the engine. "It is not broken," he repeated. Charlotte stepped closer now, just a few feet away. "Then what is it?" she asked, her voice lower than before, not challenging, just searching. Ethan moved his hand slightly along the edge of the structure, stopping at a small junction where two systems met. He tapped it lightly, once, then again. "It is forced," he said, and the word hung there, unfamiliar in this space of precision and control. The engineer frowned slightly. "Forced?" he echoed. Ethan nodded. "You built it to perform at a level it does not want to stay at," he said, still calm, still measured. "It can reach it, but it cannot live there." Charlotte's eyes narrowed slightly, not in doubt, but in focus. She stepped even closer, now standing beside him, looking at the same point he was indicating. "That is the target specification," she said, almost automatically. Ethan glanced at her briefly, then back at the engine. "Targets are good," he said. "But not if they ignore what something is built for." The silence that followed was different now. Not just quiet, but attentive, the kind of silence that listens instead of waiting to speak. Ethan reached for a tool on the nearby table, nothing advanced, nothing complex, just a simple instrument. He adjusted a single component, a small recalibration, barely noticeable unless you knew exactly where to look. The engineer took a step forward, almost instinctively, then stopped, unsure whether to intervene or observe. Charlotte did not move, she did not stop him, she just watched, trusting. Something she could not fully explain. Ethan stepped back again, setting the tool down exactly where he found it, then looked at the control panel. "Start it," he said. Charlotte hesitated for half a second, then nodded toward the engineer, who moved quickly, fingers moving across the interface. The system engaged. A low hum filled the room, building gradually, controlled, measured. The engine came to life. But this time the sound was different, smoother, not louder, just balanced. The monitors flickered with data, numbers stabilizing, readings aligning in ways they had not before. The engineer stared at the screen, then back at the engine, confusion giving way to something else, something closer to realization. Charlotte did not look at the monitors right away. She looked at Ethan, standing there without reaction, without satisfaction, just present, like he had not changed anything, only allowed it to be what it already was. And in that moment, she understood something she had been missing all along, not about the engine, but about the way she had been asking it to exist. The sound of the engine settled into something steady, not loud, not aggressive, just right, and no one in the room spoke for a moment because there was nothing left to correct, nothing left to argue. The numbers on the monitors continued to align, but they no longer held the same weight, not after what had just happened. Ethan stepped back quietly, giving the space back to the people who believed it belonged to them, his hands resting at his sides. No claim, no ownership. Charlotte remained where she was, eyes moving from the engine to the data and then back to him, but this time she did not look confused. She looked still, like something inside her had finally stopped pushing against itself. One of the engineers cleared his throat softly, almost hesitant. "It is within optimal range," he said, as if confirming something he did not fully understand. Charlotte nodded once, but she did not respond to him. Her attention stayed on Ethan. "You changed one adjustment," she said, not questioning, just stating what she saw. Ethan nodded slightly. "It was already there," he replied, and the answer landed deeper than any explanation could have. Charlotte let out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing in a way that had nothing to do with the engine. She looked back at the machine one more time, then at the room around it, the people, the systems, the control, and for the first time, it all felt incomplete, not wrong, just missing something she could not measure. She turned back to Ethan. "How did you know?" she asked, softer now, not as a CEO, not as someone in control, just as someone who needed to understand. Ethan glanced briefly toward the engine, then back at her. "It was working too hard to be what it was not," he said, and there was no judgment in it, just observation. Charlotte nodded slowly, the words settling into something she recognized beyond the machine, something closer to herself. She looked down for a second, then back up. "We built it to outperform everything else," she said, almost to herself. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Sometimes outperforming is just surviving longer than something else," he replied, "not being better." The room stayed quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. It was heavier, more honest. Charlotte held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a small nod, not agreement, not surrender, just acknowledgement. She turned slightly, addressing the engineer without looking away completely. "Run a full cycle under the new calibration," she said, her voice steady again but different now, less sharp, more grounded. The engineer nodded quickly, already moving. Charlotte stepped back, giving space, then looked toward the entrance where Miles stood, still watching his father, not the machine. She walked over slowly, stopping beside him. "He did not touch much," Miles said quietly, as if that mattered. Charlotte glanced down at him, then back at Ethan. "No," she said softly, "he did not." Miles nodded, Satisfied with that, Charlotte lingered there for a second, then turned back toward Ethan. "I can have someone take him to school," she said, offering it without control, without expectation. Ethan shook his head gently. "I will take him," he replied. Charlotte nodded, not insisting, just accepting. She took a step closer, stopping a few feet from him, the distance that now felt like choice, not separation. "You should be here again tomorrow," she said, but it was not an order, it was something else, something quieter. Ethan considered it for a moment, then nodded once. "If it needs it," he said. Charlotte gave the smallest hint of a smile, not polished, not practiced, just real for a second. "It probably does," she replied. And as the engine continued to run behind them, steady and balanced, something else had shifted too, something neither of them had tried to fix, but both of them now understood a little better.